a lot of people today are thinking that digital marketing is about clicks, impressions, maybe their website, social media. I know social media has taken us down this path in a very deep way. Email marketing, pay-per-click, and people come and talk to me all the time about digital marketing, and they think it's these things. And while this is maybe the output of how we embrace digital marketing, I'd like to pose a different thought. I think marketing at any given time, whether you're using digital tools to reach people, is about people. And it's all about the people that you think are best for your products and services. And the bad news today is that because of the digital world and the internet and the web, we can't look people in the eye the way we used to. We now have a screen between us and our audience. And I'm not looking you in the eye today during this webinar, so I have to trust that you're there. I have to trust that you're people who are interested in this content. So that's the bad news. The good news is that everything we're doing online, we can now start to use data, and we can track and measure, and we can start to assess whether or not the way we're reaching out to people is actually working. So I'd like to pose a different definition of digital marketing. I would like to say that digital marketing is reaching out to people online in a human way to learn if your value proposition matters to them. And I think that in today's world of reach and being all over the place online, we think it's about volume, but I would like to say that we need to take some time to figure out who's in our tribe, who's in our audience, who are the people that we really want to reach. And we want to do that in a human way to understand if our products or services matter to them. So I wanted to share a quick story with you. I think this is the best way to represent this. And I know a lot of you online today are probably young, and you probably can't think back to buying stuff 40 years ago. And that's okay, but I'm going to take you back to buying stuff 40 years ago. I want to share this picture. This is a picture of my grandparents. And this is back in the 70s. And they're standing in front of, my grandfather's standing in front of this really unique tent trailer called a combi camper. And his buyer journey in the 80s, he went to 2 trade shows that were well over 250 kilometers from his house. He looked at several brochures. He spent hours of library research, countless phone calls, multiple letters. It took him several weeks to purchase. He spent hours and hours with sales teams. And this was all to buy this very unique European trailer that if you look behind where my grandfather's standing in those fabulous 1970 shorts that he has on right now, there was a hinge, and that hinge flipped open for the tent trailer. And that's what made this tent trailer so unique. And it was one of those things that he spent a lot of research and time on. Now let's just think about buying stuff right now. Let's just think about our lives right now. And I don't know if you're like me, but a couple months back, probably it was last fall, I was sitting around on a Saturday morning, had my cell phone in one hand, my iPad in the other. I still hadn't gotten out of my pajamas. I was having my first coffee in the morning, and I thought to myself, I wonder what I'd like to have for dinner. And it was a cold fall day, and I thought, you know, I haven't had meatloaf in a while, and so I went to my go-to website for recipes, and I found on Martha Stewart for meatloaf recipe. And then that kind of led me to think, I wonder if meatloaf is healthy for you. You know, we're all cautious about what we're eating today, and that led me to another online search about meatloaf. My laptop was not far away as well for me as I was sitting having my coffee on a Saturday morning. And then the next thing I thought was, if meatloaf is not healthy because of the fat and everything else, I wonder if there's something you could do about that. And that led me to Amazon to find out that, lo and behold, Rachel Ray had a meatloaf pan, which was kind of cool. I didn't know much about the meatloaf pan. And I thought, well, this is pretty interesting because now you can lift away the grease, and I think that's probably what causes a lot of the fat and unhealthiness of meatloaf. Which then, of course, led me to an obvious search. Is Meatloaf the singer still alive? And as I was about to type in, is Meatloaf dead? All these things came up. So clearly I wasn't the only one questioning whether the singer Meatloaf was still alive. And that led me to thinking about this fabulous album that he had put out that I just loved. I loved this album. I loved the music in it. It was a big part of the road trips that we used to go on when I was a kid, and when I would go camping with my grandparents in that tent trailer. So that was sort of my next thought process as I was thinking this through. And then, of course, I got on my phone to text my husband because he's a bit of a smart aleck and he tends to be a bit of a trivia buff. And so I thought I'd test him out and I'd say, is Meatloaf dead? Of course, he's the smart aleck that he is, says the dinner entree or Michael Leah Day, because he knew the singer's real name. And I said, well, no, the singer. And he said, well, no, he just canceled the gig in Edmonton. And my response was it something he ate? And no, he just couldn't take singing Bat Out of Hell one more time. So my exchange with him to test his trivia knowledge on this, really started to get me thinking. And that led me to a search on a online buy and sell tool in Canada called Kijiji. And I had always wanted to buy a 1970s Volkswagen camper van. And I had been searching, off and on a little bit here and there. But this Saturday morning, the idea of this album, the idea of Meatloaf, it all just sort of came round for me. And this is when I found out that there was actually one being sold here in Ontario. And they don't come up for sale very often because our winters tend to get them. And so I was starting to get very excited about this. I then got on Instant Messenger to Facebook, and I messaged my friend out in California who's a car aficionado. And I asked him, what was the best way to go about buying this? And he came back with a long reply via instant message saying, you really need to get the mechanic first. And the reason you need to do that is because you're probably going to be putting a lot of money into it. So you get your mechanic first and then you buy your van, which I thought was pretty good advice. That afternoon, I drove down to Niagara Falls, Ontario, where the first one was for sale and that I'd gone to look at. And this is a picture of me, and I popped it out to Instagram to my followers to said, should I buy it? Is this the one for me? And I got some really great responses from friends and family. And I decided not to buy this one because it was too much work. But 2 days later, I went to visit somebody who had this 1978 Westphalia camper van, and I purchased it. And this is a picture of me and my daughter and my granddaughter after we had bought it and put our own personalized license plates on it. So what's the moral of this buying process story? I used 4 different search engines: Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Kijiji. I used my laptop, my tablet, my cell phone. I was on Wikipedia. I used 2 social media platforms, Facebook and Instagram, to talk to people. I spent no time with a salesperson, and I went direct to the seller. So there's 3 reasons why this matters today. The reason is old school marketing just doesn't work the way it used to. There's 100 billion search queries done every month. 22% of smartphone owners worldwide use their device every 5 minutes. 34% of desktop users click on the first search result. And I have to say, as a marketer, that's the one that breaks my heart the most, because it means we're not even bothering to go down to the bottom of the page. We just take the first result that gets served to us, regardless of what that is. 53% of emails are opened on mobile devices. 3 million blog posts are written each day, and 80% of B2B social media leads stem from LinkedIn. Those are pretty phenomenal stats that we didn't have even 5 years ago. In late 2016, my company, Marketing Copilot, did a study with the National Research Council of Canada and a local college, Georgian College. And we did this study on what buyers are looking for when they buy from companies and what sellers think buyers want. And in this study, we found out that their preferred method of communicating with people was email. 5% still like to receive stuff in the mail. 11% wanted it by social media. But the one that I think is very telling, and when Connie asked the question at the beginning of the webinar, who enjoys sales? I think it's because we have it ingrained in our head that sales is about getting on the phone and cold calling people. And only 1% of buyers want to be reached by phone, which I think is, again, very, very telling. So these were stats that we pulled from our research study, which is available on our website if anybody's interested. But this was, I think, a very important stat because there was a big disconnect between how buyers wanted to buy and how sellers thought they wanted to buy. And that leads to stats that I'm sure you're aware of and things that you hear on a regular basis on the topic of digital marketing, is that the buyer journey has dramatically changed. 97% of B2B buyers start their journey with some form of search. And I don't know if the people in the audience today are selling to other businesses or if they're selling to consumers, but the numbers roughly hold true. Buyers are 70% of the way through their buying process before they contact a salesperson or before they even contact your company. They've done their research, they've looked at stuff, they've figured out what their choices are. The second reason why my buyer journey story I think is important is your website is your most important sales tool. It is the thing that everybody is going to expect to go to. Even if they reach you on social media, they're going to click through to a website. They want to click through to understand who are you, how can you help them, and why does it matter to them. And I want to talk a minute about the history of websites. I've been building websites for companies since probably the mid-90s, and a lot has changed. In the 2000s, we would take an online brochure, or we'd take a brochure and we'd put it up online as a website. In 2000s and 10s, it was about getting found. We'd figure out how to trick out the back of that website so it would rank in that first page search result. In 2018, I'd like you to give some thought to the fact that your website needs to be a lead generation and lead nurturing tool via your web presence. And it's an unbelievably important tool that you need to use in your sales process today. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. The third reason why my buyer story I think matters is that the buying process has forever changed, and therefore so has the sales funnel. And I want to just spend a minute and talk about that. Even with new tactics like Google AdWords or buying email lists, people still see the funnel as a funnel, that there's just this mass universe of people out there who want to buy from you. And the fact of the matter is that people have spent a lot of time and money on this idea of mass marketing to get people into the top of the funnel, and they think that with things like Google and Google AdWords, that's going to help them today. But that is a shotgun approach to trying to get a whole bunch of people at the top, doing a whole bunch of outbound activity to see if they're even remotely interested, chasing leads, are you ready to buy, are you ready to buy, qualifying leads, are you ready to buy now, and then closing deals. And this funnel just doesn't work in today's world, and it certainly doesn't work with today's buyer. Think about yourself. Think about how often you've gotten on someone's mailing list or gotten in touch with someone because you were remotely interested and they just keep chasing you, and how you don't like that. So I'd like to suggest in today's world that the new sales funnel is not a funnel at all, it's a pyramid. And the top of the pyramid needs to start with your very best customer. And what you understand about that very best customer and why they bought from you, and how they became a lead, how they became even interested, how they started the sales conversation, how you've been keeping in touch and doing lead generation and lead nurturing, if you've been sharing value-added content, if you've established a unique value proposition, and therefore that's what's bubbled up from all the places you may be online today. Or maybe it's bubbled up because you went to a networking event and then people reached out and wanted to contact you and find out more. But I suggest that we don't need to look at this funnel as this big mass of people at the top that we're trying to distill down. We need to start with our absolute best customer and model their behavior. And that behavior needs to then flow down over all of our activities. The most important thing about today's changed buyer behavior is that we're no longer, quote unquote, selling anymore. We're educating. And educating is what brings people to us. Educating is what helps people understand the implication of our products and services to their business problems. And when we do that, we flip the funnel around and we find that engagement is much better. So I wanted you to just take a minute. I want you to think about where you might be at in your web presence today. And if you don't have a website, that's okay. But think about what's going on with your web presence. Is your website basically a brochure put on the web with basic contact information? And if it is, that's okay. That's what we would call V1. V2, your website's a brochure plus maybe some SEO work done on the web team with basic product keywords in order for your website to rank for something. V3, you have a website and you've acknowledged that it plays some sort of role in the lead generation and lead nurturing process, but you can't yet explain how and when prospects and customers come to use your site. So that's what we would call a V3. V4, you've acknowledged the importance of the online buyer journey and have dedicated resources and time to map it to your website and have a way to consistently push out content and measure it. And V5, you've got a documented content plan mapped to lead generation goals and a team in place to drive traffic, test and measure the effectiveness of your content in terms of lead generation and lead nurturing. And oftentimes I work with companies, large and small, startups, well-established companies, and they're all very concerned about the tactics about driving traffic. Well, maybe we should be doing AdWords, maybe we should be on Facebook, maybe we should be doing webinars. And all those things are really cool, but people are going to go back to a point on the web to learn more, to connect with you, to engage. And you need to think about those points as well, which is oftentimes your website. And you really need to think through that journey you're taking people through on your website, as well as when you engage them on social media and other places. So digital marketing today needs to reach the right audience, not just any audience. And I think that's something that social media has tricked us into thinking, that we can be everywhere, we can be online with these tools, they're free. Hey, it's easy to start a Twitter account. But there's no point spending your time there if it's not the right audience. Explaining what you do is paramount, because now when people, let's just say for sake of argument, you are good enough to get on page 1 for a really important keyword. Let's just say it's coaching or consulting services in your immediate geography, and you're able to get that click through to your homepage, and you don't do a good job of engaging right on the homepage. Today you have 8 seconds or less to explain what you do. And your website content needs to be relevant to your buyer's process. I think this is the missing ingredient that a lot of people don't get. They think that they need to write content about themselves, not content about what their buyer needs to understand to take the next step in the buyer journey. And you also need timely, measurable opportunities for prospects to start a sales conversation. And this is how we can flip the sales process online to the marketing world. So let's start with the first one. Understand who your ideal customers are and how they find solutions like yours. There's a lot of data available today in things like Google Analytics, even on social media platforms. You can even just go out and ask your customers, your best customer, how would you normally have gone to search for this product or service? How would you have gone to find these kinds of things? And so this is the importance of what we call a buyer persona. And back in the old ad days, we might have called it demographics or a customer profile. And the difference is this. Demographics or customer profile aren't very useful today, because a 22-year-old female might buy something the same way a 65-year-old man does. It's their priorities, their success factors, excuse me, their perceived criteria or perceived barriers, their criteria, and their buyer journey that link them together, that make them unique. And these are the things you'll want to document for your business, because your buyers' highest level priority, what they hope to achieve. So let's say, for example, you sell coaching services, and their highest level priority is to become a better leader. You need to make sure then that that core emotional trigger is somewhere on your website about becoming a better leader, if you're going to engage people in the idea that perhaps they should consider you for coaching services. The success factors of what they hope to achieve when they buy. And number 3, this is the one I love the most as a marketer. I love it when I work with clients to document perceived barriers. Why don't they choose you? And a lot of times I hear things from people like, well, my idea is too complex to communicate, so they don't really know what it is that I sell. I'm not credible. I sell against a big name brand, therefore they trust the big name brand. All of those things can be overcome in content and on your website when it's structured correctly. So when you spend time documenting your perceived barriers, you can use that to flip it around to engage people in those ideas that they might not have wanted to buy from you in why they should buy from you. Criteria and how they choose and where they go to weigh options, well, that's the bread and butter. That's the magic of your marketing today that's going to get people into a sales dialogue. You have the data, and if you do have a website up, please use a free tool called Google Analytics and make sure it's running in the back end. It will tell you where people go online, how long they sit on your site, what they look at, the pages they go to, and the information is all there. It's golden, really. And some people say, oh, it's too tricky, it's too complicated, I don't know how to use it. And there's lots of great tutorials online to teach you how to use it. And just as I was sitting there in my pajamas on a Saturday morning trying to figure out meatloaf recipes, trust me, it's worth an hour of your time to figure this out.
Hey, Marie, can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
You're talking about different, different applications, different tools online, and it could really get cumbersome and confusing for a lot of people, especially if they're really not technology savvy like myself. So if you were to add value to a business, what is that one thing online that you would suggest people work with and really focus on?
I would say Google Analytics, and I would make sure that it's running on your website and that you have even just a high level of understanding of it. It's really not that difficult to install. It's a piece of code that you install on your site. It can really be done in 5 minutes by anybody who knows how to get in the back end of your site if it hasn't already been done. And then you just need a username and login, but it's just fabulous information. It tells you what countries people are coming from. It tells you how many people are coming on a mobile device. Even if you spent 10 minutes looking at the data, it would hugely inform your marketing tactics. So I would say get to know that and get to know your data.
Okay. All right. That's really helpful. Thank you.
The next place you probably have a lot of information, so this would be my number 2, Connie, would be your email marketing. And I don't know if you have if people are using proper email marketing platforms. But even in one-to-one communications with people in whatever email client you use, whether it's Google, Microsoft, whatever, there's lots of great information sitting in email that people don't think about. When they get asked questions about their services and they reply in email, that's amazing content for your website or a blog post. But if you are using a proper email platform, there's incredible information in that as well. But most importantly, the data sits in your customer, and how you choose to get at that data is up to you. But by really engaging with your best customer and talking to them about how they picked a solution like yours or a product or service like yours, that's where you're really going to mine some really good information. Now, this is kind of my whole team laughs at me because I draw such horrible pictures, so I hope you'll bear with me on this one. This is not the best picture in the world, but when you think back to what I showed about the buyer persona and the things that people are concerned about perhaps buying from you, your value proposition, your customer priority, this is how you would map it to a website. So the idea that you would use your navigation to address those barriers. And I'll just use a real simple one that a lot of people don't put up on their websites, but a real simple one is pricing. And most people, whether they're buying something for themselves or for their business, they go through 5 core questions in their head. What is this? How would I use this and does it apply to me? Why does it matter to what's going on in my life right this minute? Can I afford it? Can I afford it, or how much does it cost is always the 4th or 5th question. And people don't address that in any way, especially if they're selling a service. They want to get somebody into a sales conversation before they discuss pricing. But I think it's really important to put some form, even if it's a base case of pricing, because it's always the 4th or 5th question in the buyer's mind. So I've just designed this very basic web page that shows how you would map your buyer persona to your website and the types of content then that needs to be on your website to really start to harness the power of that buyer journey. The second thing I want to touch on is articulate why these ideal customers should buy from you as opposed to the other options that they have. So that's the second thing I think people are challenged with in today's digital world, is how they present their products or solution. So for example, I do a lot of work in the tech sector, and I don't know about you, but I'm really, really frustrated with everybody talking about cloud services. I really, what the heck are cloud services? And so a lot of these companies that I've been working with talk about how great their cloud services are. And I say to them, okay, so cloud services, and isn't that just a new way to buy technology? Isn't your customer really trying to figure out how to reduce their capital expenditures, reduce the risk of getting control over cash management, getting rid of hardware and software expenses? Isn't that really what they're trying to do? And isn't that the benefit of cloud? And they always say to me, well, yeah, that's the benefit. And I say, well, then why are you talking about cloud services? Why aren't you out there with things to help people address these kinds of things? So this is where you need to flip around what you do and try to really harness that idea that the customer has a problem they're trying to overcome. Your customer, your client has got that highest level priority, And that's the way you need to be talking about things today online, because if you don't, you're not going to get somebody into the sales conversation. And then the third thing that I think is important today is value-added content that helps buyers make purchase decisions. So remember I talked about people will contact you via email as an example, and they'll say, I'm having a problem with X. Is there any advice you can give me? And you've probably written these kind of emails and said, if you're really interested in leadership coaching for your team, here's the kinds of things you might want to consider when you're going out to look at different leadership coaching solutions. And you go back and forth in these emails, and what you don't realize is you're creating amazing content that can be used publicly, because if one person cares about that topic, chances are there's probably tons of other people who do. So what you want to do is go back to your buyer persona, and you want to really focus on the buyer's priority, their success factors, and perceived barriers, and make sure this content is all available on your website, on your LinkedIn profile, any place where you're posting content online. You want to use that persona type content to attract the very best customers to you. And good content can come from a whole bunch of different places. We have a keyword strategy workbook on our website that's a resource that you can download, and it shows you how to use keyword data to figure out what topics people are searching for, to figure out what kind of content you should have. I've already mentioned emails from customers, but the other one I love is if you ever have a chance and you're sitting in a sales conversation with someone and they have questions. Document the top 10 sales questions that you get asked in your sales cycle, in your sales process, and make sure again that that's content on your website, because those make fantastic blog posts. Things like, how long does it take for content marketing to pay off if I choose to invest in it? I get asked that all the time. And so I want to make sure that's a blog post on my site, because that way I know that if somebody is self-serving and they are trying to self-select in the buyer journey and I haven't heard from them yet, hopefully they get to that blog post and now they have a good understanding of how I'm going to help them answer that question for their business. And why does good content matter so much today? And I talked about educating versus selling. Well, good content builds trust. It positions you as a subject matter expert. It proves your ability to get found for the right things. And it gives your sales team stuff to share. So instead of chasing somebody, are you ready to buy? Are you ready to buy? You can share a link and say, we just posted this recent article on the top 10 reasons why you might want to incorporate leadership coaching into your business, or the top 10 reasons you might want to consider content marketing. Hope you find it of value. And it's a way to keep in touch without hassling people. And good content really does start the buyer journey. So the fourth reason that we talked about the importance of this content and how you want to map this out is that it creates a signal and it allows people to qualify themselves into your pipeline. Good content provides buyers with opportunities to say, I'm interested in this or I'm not interested in this. So remember we talked about digital marketing is really about reaching out to human beings online in a human way to see if your value proposition matters to them. And so it's really important that you're looking at places where you're putting stuff out and you're looking for those buying signals. Did somebody like this? Did somebody share this? Did somebody open my email? How many times does this person come back to my website? It also gives people the opportunity to say no. I've worked with lots of companies who are afraid to create a positioning statement that's specific and precise because they say, well, then then I won't be able to capture this group over here that I may want to talk to. And you can't be everywhere. You can't be all things to all people. When you're all things to all people, you're nothing to anyone. And so you really want to fine tune it, because it's great to give somebody the opportunity to say no. It's great to be so clear and articulate in your value proposition that somebody says, this isn't for me. Because now they're not wasting time, you're not wasting time. That's the beauty of the buyer journey and the buyer persona today. So I want to talk a minute about your toolkit, and I want you to think about it in this way. Today, a digital marketer's toolkit has three main components, what we call owned, rented, and paid. And owned is anything that you control. You can control your website content, you can control your blog, your email, your newsletters, you can control it. And even if you are pushing it out, it brings traffic back and it brings people back to you. Rented are places like social tools, public relations, industry forums. They're places where you can participate, but you can't control the conversation. And you want to be there, but you have to remember that you're playing by somebody else's rules. The last is paid, and it's the one that often doesn't get the most respect in the marketing mix. It probably gets the least amount of respect because people know you've paid to be there. It was, no different back in the day when you paid for a magazine ad. People now see those paid ads at the top of Google and think, oh, I don't want to click there. That person paid to get to the top. There is a bit of a mindset, but it doesn't hurt to test things. And paid can often provide incredible value when you're testing and trying to find out who cares about your value proposition. So if we just go back to digital marketing defined, reaching out to people online in a human way to learn if your value proposition matters to them.
Hey, Marie, can I just jump back on your previous slide? You had billboards. How relevant, I mean, they might be to the big chain stores or big business. How relevant do you think billboards are to an entrepreneur leading their business?
Well, it's funny you ask that. I'm a huge fan of Seth Godin, and I think he's just an incredible marketer. And he actually did a great post about billboards, and he was curious as he was driving actually right through my neighborhood on his way up to Algonquin Park in Northern Ontario. And he saw a billboard for local cleanup crews, and somebody had a billboard for services because they would go in after water floods and damages. Okay. And he actually posed the question, I wonder how useful this is.
Right.
And he found out that there had been a lot of flooding and damages happening in the area. And then in fact, that billboard drove huge amounts of traffic for that company. And they were a small business who was going in to do cleanup control after a big flood had happened.
So it's specific and it was relevant to that. I mean, I'll have to admit, I was at a meeting last week and missed breakfast, missed lunch, and driving home, and I was really hungry. And most of you know I am a vegan, and there was a billboard for McDonald's, and I had to scoop in there and get myself some French fries. And it was based on that billboard. If I had not seen that billboard, I would have went home hungry.
Well, it is. It's a point in time, right? It's knowing where your customers are and being there at that point in time when they're inquiring or thinking about you. And I think that's really important. So billboards aren't going to work for everyone. And if you're just mass marketing to get people into the top of the funnel, it's not going to be very effective. No. But if you've really reverse engineered what your customer really cares about, I think it can be incredibly valuable. And I think that it can pay off in spades when you're in the right place at the right time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Well, McDonald's was busy that day.
Yeah, sadly they are often busy, and sadly they're often the first choice for.
And I never go there, but I was just really hungry, and that billboard fed me. So okay, thank you.
So just some closing thoughts. Start with people, not digital channels, to build your plan. Oftentimes people jump to tactics right out the gate. Oh, we have to do pay-per-click. Oh, we should get going with Facebook. But I don't think that serves the business well, because it's the people that you really need to understand how they're engaging, where they're engaging online, and that's really what you should build your plan. You really need to spend a lot more time these days understanding what drives your ideal customer. And, sadly, we live in a world now of too much choice and too little time to make decisions. And I think that that's driving buyer behavior as well. And so you need to spend more time than ever really understanding what drives your ideal customer. This is not the 50s when demand outweighed supply. This is the 2020s that we're heading into, where there is way more choice than there has ever been. And so that understanding your customer is what you should be spending a ton of time on. And you can't be everywhere, so focus on where your customers are. And I think that's sort of a good rule of thumb for marketing across the board. But if you don't do the bullet point above it, understanding what drives your ideal customers, you take a shotgun approach to things that don't tend to pan out very well.
So I do have a few more questions, Marie, before we get into your closing. And you talked more about a website earlier, and I do agree, but I've actually come in and found recently that there's been some people that don't have a website, and they're not relying on a website. They're relying more on social media. So from what I'm hearing from you, it is really relevant to have a website. What are your thoughts on on those that don't? And I think it's really a lot of the millennials, and they're looking at it differently, where they don't need to have that website.
Yeah, I mean, I've found this recently too with particularly on Instagram, sponsored content on Instagram that drives you to a specific page for like 5 different things that you can purchase, but there's nothing else there. And again, I think it comes back to your strategy of where are your customers and where are you engaging with them. I know lots of consultants these days who don't bother with websites because they are just building their LinkedIn profile and they think that that's where their prospects are and that's going to help.
Right.
And I don't disagree with that. I've given what I call solopreneurs, independent consultants, that advice that says, don't bother with the headache and hassle of trying to figure out a website, but do bother with good content. And so I'm coaching a couple of executives right now on how to develop content that they can post on their LinkedIn profile and then have other people share on their websites. So, and they're getting like phenomenal success with this, but they don't necessarily need a website. So there's, again, it just depends on what your strategy is. And I've oftentimes had these solopreneurs come to me and say, I desperately need a website. I'm like, well, are you scaling your business? Is it going to be more than just you? What is it that you want the website to do for you? And if they just want it to be an online brochure, I say to them, don't bother. But if you want to start a blog and you want to start creating really great content on topics that your prospects would be interested in, then do that. Focus on that and then figure out where to put it. And spend your time and energy there rather than figuring out some website.
All right, so then that leads me into my next question. And again, for entrepreneurs, a lot of entrepreneurs come into this, maybe they've stepped out of corporate, or however that whatever their journey was that took them to become an entrepreneur, and they have this passion, they have this gift for giving back, they have this intellectual property, and they go out there and they're just like dumping in social media, and whether it be their website or whatever it is that they decide to do their marketing, but they're not really hitting the bullseye of who they really want to be working with. So in determining what you're talking about is, okay, do I do a blog on XYZ? Or so how do we help entrepreneurs figure out their buyer's journey and where their buyers are, so they can intelligently write that blog and intelligently have a LinkedIn page or a website page? So what's the best journey for them to figure out where their buyers are?
Great question. So that's where we use a buyer persona template. And I don't know if we're doing show notes, but I'll make sure I send a link to Sophia. There's a fabulous researcher on this topic, Adele Ravella, who's written a whole book on buyer personas. And it goes back to who is the best customer that you want to serve? Who is it that you want to work with? And by using that buyer persona to reverse engineer what they care about, that should land you on a core thought or a core content piece around what you should be talking about. And I'm going to use an example. I've been working with an executive who left the food industry, very senior executive in the food industry, and he's now doing CEO peer-to-peer coaching. And so he didn't know what to write about. He was lost. And when he thought about what he was doing in his peer groups, it was a lot about leadership. And I said, but what kind of person do you really, really want to work with? And he said, well, the leaders that I like working with the most are people who show incredible generosity in their business life and in their personal life. And I said, that's a really interesting thought. Generosity is a core thought that instead of talking about leadership, which is, wide and varied and tons of people talk about it, if the generosity of leadership is your theme, then let's go deep on that. Let's be specific on that, because if people are interested in that topic, they're going to seek you out and they're going to want to talk to you about that, because that isn't a common theme that you would associate with leadership. And so we reverse engineered that based on his buyer persona. Who are the types of people you really, really, really want in your peer group? And when we figured out that there was a commonality, we could use that core topic now to run really hard at the topic he wants to be known for. And I think that even if you're an independent consultant or whatever, take the time, and even if you have to bounce that off someone, take the time to build that persona and figure out what that one thing is that you really want to identify and that you really think you can speak to in your products or services. And that's how you should start reverse engineering it, because just dumping content into the world, Connie, as you said, is just not a useful exercise these days. It's too much noise, too much clutter. You really have to focus on what you want to be known for.
Yeah, and this is more of a statement rather than a question, and that's absolutely true, because how many people are out there talking about leadership? I mean, thousands.
Exactly.
So if you just put out, oh, I'm talking about leadership, well, you really need to drive that down even more specific. So for example, I talk about leadership and high performance for executive women, for executive men. My specialty, of course, is working with women. But you really need to drive that message to, this is my specialty. Yes, I talk about leadership, but what type of leadership do you talk about? And who is your target market? Who is your target audience? Create that avatar and talk specifically to that person. Every time you blog, every time you get on a podcast, every time you do a webinar, talk to that individual, talk to that specific person. So Marie, I know you have a couple of closing comments, so I'm going to let you close, and then I will do a close. Let me see, I'm just double checking to see if we have any more questions here. And okay, from Tatiana, she's saying that she totally loves your approach and loves your guidance. And okay, she was talking about her name, but she just loves your approach, loves your guidance, and she'd love to have a more conversation with you around that. So again, Marie, I'll give you just a couple of minutes to wrap up, and then again, I'll do a final close for our show today.
Fantastic. Okay. So just very quickly, our company, Marketing Copilot, is what we call performance-based marketing, where we have a methodology to help companies reduce the cost of lead acquisition, improve the quality of leads, and increase revenue. We go through this idea of changing the sales funnel to a pyramid and really focusing on buyer persona and using that to build out. So that's really what our company does. Connie, you were gracious enough to highlight my book at the beginning of the session. I've written this book, You Can't Be Everywhere. And I'm gonna throw it out there to anybody online today. I'm gonna put my email address up in a second, and the first 3 people who email me and send me their address, I will mail them a copy of my book. Just as a gift with purchase today. So the first 3 people who email me, and there's how you can email me, marie@marketingcopilot.com. So email me your address and I will pop the book in the mail, and just my picture there. My daughter and I have started a social enterprise business that we're working on this year called Glamper Girls, and our idea is to sell stylish camping gear and the proceeds of that to help writers, bloggers, and videographers live their work-life balance dream. And so that's me in my 1970s van, and stay tuned on that, because we're going to do a little bit more this year coming up with Glamper Girls. And
I love the van, by the way. And Marie, I'm going to do this right now. The first 3 people to put their name in our chat box, we're going to call their names out right now, that are going to get a copy of your book.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, great.
Okay, love the van, love the van. Let's see, we got Kathleen Caldwell.
Fantastic.
And Tatiana's already in there. And Mona Vogel, I'm sorry if I'm saying your name incorrectly. So there's our 3, Tatiana, Kathleen Caldwell, and Mona. So
fantastic.
You're going to get a book. Be sure that you, again, Marie at Marketing Copilot, you could send her a note, and then she'll get that out to you. So Marie, just a couple closing comments. I want to thank you for being here today. Thank you for hosting our show and sharing your expertise on marketing, because again, without marketing, you're not going to have any sales. So we know, again, contact Marie at marketingcopilot.com. You could also find her on LinkedIn at Marketing Copilot. And so that's all we have for today. And again, remember to check us out, womanwhodare.com. We have a lot of more webinars coming up in a couple of weeks. We have Karen Kennedy, and she's going to be on March 28th, Wednesday, March 28th at 10 p.m. Pacific time. We also have on April 30th our fabulous Women Who Dare Unstoppable Together Summit that is going to be virtual. You can register for that. Everything online at womanwhodare.com. Hope to see you over there. I'm Connie Fife, and I am founder of Women Who Dare, who is a brand of the Fife Group in partnership with the C-Suite Network. So until we meet again, I want you all to be bold, to be fabulous, and all be unstoppable together.
Thank you, Connie.
Thank you all for being here.